Hello there, everyone. So this is a pre-recorded video of the orientation for Animation 11a. So the previous synchronous learning session that we had did not really have an audio for the video, so I will be re-recording it for you today. So for this one, we're going to talk about just the introduction and also just the orientation. I won't really be focusing on the survey. So we have here a short introduction about the instructor, Introduction to Animation NC2 and Animation 11a, the course outline, grading system, final project, synchronous and asynchronous learning, and other student expectations. So before we begin with anything else, let me just introduce myself. So my name is Lovely Jen Reformado, and I am the Strand Coordinator for the TVL ICT department and will also be for your subject teacher. So you can contact me through the following addresses. So I have my email, my Discord, and my Messenger. For the consultation hours, if you would like to get a more abrupt response or a more instant response from me, I would suggest that you would follow these consultation hours unless we have another engagement through. I will try my best to respond to you as quickly as I can, but I cannot really guarantee it. If you want a more abrupt response, I would like you to please send it to me via email or through Discord. Messenger might be the last thing that I would look into. Also, for your reference, I would like you to also please follow our UC-SHS ICT department Facebook page. So all of our announcements will be placed there, not only about the subject, but mostly about the events that we have for senior high school and how we conduct our classes generally. So let's have first a short introduction to Animation 11a, particularly Animation NC2, and also the subject itself, which is Animation 11a. We also have here a course outline and a grading system, which we will be delving it a little bit more. So here we have first a short introduction of what Animation NC2 really is. So Animation NC2 is actually a national certification. So this subject, your subject for computer programming NC3 and for contact center services NC2 is not necessarily part of DepEd or the Department of Education. It actually came from TESDA, which is more on technical, educating us through technical skills. And what they have or what they offer is something which we call as a national certification. So a national certification usually consists of competencies that a person must achieve. For Animation NC2, you must be able to produce traditional and digital cleanup and in-between drawings. So why do we have this in senior high school? So for senior high school, we have usually 4 assessments, and one of them is for you to be able to work after graduation. The good thing about using technical vocational livelihood as a strand rather or a track rather than the academic track is that you are almost guaranteed to have the skills and the knowledge for you to work immediately after graduation. And one of the ways on how we do that is through the national certification. So if a student obtains a national certification, they are able to then get a job in the animation industry anywhere in the Philippines. So like let's say, should you want to pursue this a little bit further and you would like to go on with the actual assessment and um, the other lessons that's necessary for animation and C2, then even after you don't really take up college and even through senior high school, technically speaking, once you have a national certification, you're able to get an entry level job in the animation industry in the Philippines. If like let's say if you have a certification for contact center services NC2 or customer service NC2, then you're technically able to get a job after senior high school. So that is one of the ways on how the new curriculum would offer students for them to be able to go to work without really going to tertiary or higher education. So now let's have a short roadmap of what Animation NC2 is. So there are actually 4 subjects for this one. So we have 11A, 11B, 12A, and 12B. So for this one, they have different topics and they tend to have different goals as well. So for 11A, the one that we're going to focus on today is that we're mostly going to focus on foundations on drawing, particularly focusing on understanding proportions and basic shapes of the human body. We also have 11B, which is advanced drawing skills and modeling, which focuses on solidifying foundations of drawing for animation. So usually, if ever you're going to enroll at an art school or an animation school in the Philippines and even sometimes worldwide, you need to have a certain set of drawing skills already. So usually you would need to submit a portfolio whatsoever. However, in the University of the Cordilleras, we do not necessarily have an examination or a filtering system. We are an open admission university. So with that one, we come in, or the student comes in, and we mostly assume that they don't really have drawing experience. Therefore, it is necessary for the teachers to teach some drawing experience before they can then move on to animation. Because for you to be able to draw is somewhat a requirement for you to be able to animate. So with that one, there is a necessity for you to understand how to draw and how to draw it properly for you to be able to prepare yourself for animation. Now we have animation 12A and 12B, which mostly focuses on the actual animation concepts and skills. So for 12A, we have here traditional cleanup and in-betweening, and we have digital cleanup and in-betweening. So for this one, after you finish animation 12B, you will be taking an assessment theoretically, and if you pass, you are now able to take you now have a national certification, which will allow you to work anywhere in the Philippines after you graduate senior high school. So with that one, it's a little bit different when it comes to contact center services. So the one that I showed to you is the full roadmap. However, for contact center services, you will only be having 2 animation and C2 subjects only. So the reason for that one is because for animation substrands, they tend to have only 2 main subjects. We have animation NC2, and we also have computer programming NC3. Whereas for contact center services, you have 3 specialization subjects. So you have your contact center services NC2, animation NC2, and computer programming NC2. So with that one, we can't really give you the full strand or the full subject with both animation NC2 and for computer programming, because that's not really your main focus. Your main focus is contact center services. And if ever we were to give you the full spectrum of it, then you will not be able, or you would have more subjects than you have to deal with. So with that one, we just focus on 11A and 11B. So if you were to look back at the roadmap, you would see that a lot of these ones would tend to really focus on drawing skills. Whereas for 12A and 12B, that will be more for animation. So for this one, technically speaking, you're not allowed to take the animation NC2 assessment and by extension, computer programming NC3 assessment, because you need to have all of the topics and all of the skills necessary for you to get a national certification. However, since you have some sort of knowledge on it, you can, however, apply for a certificate of competency, specifically applying traditional techniques for animation. So the main purpose for animation NC2 for contact center services is for us to be able to gain a competency on drawing techniques. So with this one, whatever you've learned for animation NC2 won't necessarily be a waste. You can still technically make money out of it by doing freelance illustration and freelance drawing because of the techniques that you've learned in animation NC2. By extension, you can then pick up illustration NC2, which mostly focuses on drawing and some sort of graphic design. So with that one, your drawing foundations are basically good when we are done with animation 11B. However, the skill that you are able to get up until animation 11B is mostly up to you and how you practice and how you are able to apply the things that is taught to you. So that's for our animation NC2. Now let's focus on animation 11A. So for animation 11A, it mostly focuses on applying traditional drawing techniques in animation. As I've stated, you are coming in here in this subject in a way that us, the teachers, would assume that you don't have any drawing experience. So it doesn't matter if you've never really drawn or if you are an expert in drawing and illustration. Hopefully you would be able to learn something along the way. So here we have some sort of topics. So we have solid drawing, human anatomy, clothing, and character design, particularly the Western superhero drawing style. So let's look into that a little bit. So we have here an example of solid drawing. So solid drawing is actually the understanding of the idea that everything that you draw on paper, which is usually 2-dimensional, has to be viewed into three-dimensional. So even though you don't necessarily see the thickness or one of the dimensions, you have to think of it that way so that you can create these three-dimensional characters with just a 2D platform. So with that one, you can then move on to more complex types of drawings, like let's say extreme poses, for shortening, perspective drawing, which may be a valuable asset when you would like to turn this illustration or this drawing career into more of a career, really. We also have here the idea of human anatomy. So for human anatomy, we will be focusing on a technique mostly called as the Andrew Loomis. However, it will be created or it will be designed in such a way that it will be understood by a non artist at the fastest possible time. Because based on experience, if you try to look at a lot of drawing books, they tend to have very complicated techniques, or they tend to have very complicated techniques, or they do not really present their ideas as clearly as you would like to. So for this one, the human anatomy would mostly be step by step, so that you're able to draw a face or a body at the shortest amount of time by just simply following the instructions. So that's for that. We also have a short lesson on clothing, so more on the ideas and principles of clothing, since it is understood that you can't really teach every single type of clothing in every single situation with just one lesson. So we'll just have the very basics of it. Lastly, we have character design. So character design mostly focuses on the conceptualization of the character itself and how it should look like. So when you are designing a character, it's not just about presenting a character in one way. So you have to present it in different ways, different perspectives, different views. So we will be focusing on a certain art style. So we have chosen Western superhero drawing style, which is most likely reflected by DC Marvel Comics style type of characters. So the reason why we chose this is because number one, it is closer to realism, and at the same time, it's not as complicated as realism. So the reason why we're focusing on this one is for you to understand the basics of anatomy, human anatomy, without really going into the very deep ends of it. So you can have a very basic understanding through the use of a much more simplistic drawing style. And the reason why it's important for you to learn the human anatomy, which I've forgotten to mention, is that it is necessary for you to understand the rules of anatomy before you're able to manipulate it. So we're not saying that the Western superhero drawing style or Japanese style or realistic style is a superior style. So that's not what we're looking into. It's just that for you to be able to stylize your drawing, so let's say you're more into Japanese animation or more into different other types of Western drawing styles. So for those ones, you still need to know where the eyes are. You still need to know how to properly proportion your head from your body, how long the legs should be for it to be able to walk. So all of those things are still necessary, and those can be created through the Western superhero drawing style. So it gives us that more realism type, and at the same time, it's a little bit easier. So now let's look into the course outline. So for the course outline, we will be having 10 modules. For our module 0, this is more of an orientation. We have 5 modules per period. So one trimester is divided through midterms and finals. So for midterms, we have here your modules 1 to 5. So for module 1, we have basics of drawing, which mostly focuses on the ideas and concepts that you need for you to be able to learn how to draw. So before you can actually draw, you need to have the proper materials. You need to properly know what you have to look out for, and also some drawing exercises. We have for our module 2, we have our eyes, nose, and mouth. So for this one, we tend to really focus on creating an entire character from a simple type of drawing going out. So with this one, the design is most likely you're still able to create something that's good, yet at the same time, you can slowly learn all of these things through just a number of modules. So for the eyes, nose, and mouth, this is something that's quite simple to do, yet at the same time, it gives you a better idea as well on how to construct the face and also the body by extension. So you'll be learning how to draw the eyes, nose, and mouth, one of the three most important parts of the face, before you move on to Module 3, the human face, particularly the male and the female face. So you have to learn the differences between those two, particularly a more masculine face and a more feminine face. So for this one, it's going to be mostly on a front view type of face. For modules 4 and 5, they are now an extension of module 3. So for module 3, you'll be mostly focusing on how to draw a face in front view, but we have something which we call as head turns, which means presenting your head in different views and in different perspectives. So like, let's say we have our front view. It's quite different if you would to view it when the character is on its side view, or 3/4 view, which is kind of like an in-between of your front view and your side view. So with that one, you have your basic head turns. We have the male and the female because, again, they have differences. Now for the finals, we will mostly be focusing on the human body. For midterms, we had more of the face. For Module 6, we have drawing the male body, and Module 7, drawing the female body. Again, it's more of a front view difference of the male body and then the female body. So again, this will mostly be focusing on Western superhero style. So for the male body, expect a lot of muscle composition, whereas for the female body, mostly we will be focusing on the proper proportions between the torso and of course the legs. For Module 8, this will be a short introduction to clothing. So for this one, it will mostly be focusing on the different aspects to be able to create a type of clothing. And then based on, like, let's say, how the posture is, what the pose is, how will you be able to manipulate the clothing. It's not necessarily that you will be taught how to draw a shirt, how to draw pants, how to draw a jacket. It will be portions of that, but it would mostly be focusing on how you can turn every single type of clothing into your character, or how you can place it to your character. Because it's quite impossible for us to teach every single piece of clothing and how you're going to place it on a person. And lastly, for your modules 9 and 10, we have a full body turnaround. So for this one, it's the entire body now in different views. So we still have our front view, our side view, and our 3/4 view. We also have our male and female bodies. So by the end of this one, you would most likely be able to create a male and female model sheet. So the model sheet is basically the same character in different views. With that one, we can now move on to the grading system. So for the grading system, we do not have a quarterly assessment due to some logistical difficulties when it comes to that. So your grades would mostly be coming from your written works and your performance checks. So you might have seen this during your contact center services, but since this is a specialized subject, it has a different grading system, wherein we tend to focus on the performance check rather than the written work. So let's focus first on the written work. Your written work mostly focuses on the understanding of the concepts learned. So it's more of surface level understanding. It's more of situational analysis types of things. So that would be for modules 1, 2, 3, and 6, 7, and 8. So the type of the activities that you would mostly be focusing right here is more on, it's going to be more true or false, multiple choice. But for that one, it's a little bit more situational analysis. So you would be mostly be creating quizzes for this one. But like, let's say, even though if you have your notes by theory, you would not be able to answer it by just having the modules there. It's necessary for you to understand the content of the modules for you to get a correct answer for the written work. Nextly, for performance check, which is 70%. The reason why it's 70% because you're essentially doing a direct application of what you've learned. So for this one, you will be expected to draw. So that's for your modules 4, 5, 9, and 10. Now we have here our online distance learning. So we have two types of learning. We have our synchronous learning and our asynchronous learning. So for the synchronous learning, this will be done every Mondays from 8:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. We would mostly be focusing on either conducting lectures and discussions. An important part of the synchronous learning session is actually demonstrations. So I will be showing to you using the share screen on how to do the step-by-step process that is placed in the module. Further, if you have any question or answers, you can let me know during the synchronous learning session. So our main video conferencing tool will be Google Meet. A secondary one would be Discord. Nextly, we have our asynchronous learning session. So asynchronous learning basically means doing the modules and its activities at your own pace and at your own time. So for this one, technically speaking, even though you don't necessarily have the internet connection, as long as you have the proper materials, equipment, and modules, then you're able to do this. So the first one is modular instruction, wherein you're asked to download, read, understand the module, and do the activities that are placed in the module. So for this one, this will be mostly type of a self-learning, which is then helped by the synchronous learning session that we will be having. Next one is multimedia viewing. So it's more of looking at videos on how to do these different things so that you would be able to understand it further. So again, that can also be your synchronous learning session or other pre-recorded activities. We also have individual consultation wherein you will be asked to, or if you have any questions, you can then go on to the consultation hours and then ask for a demonstration, or if you would like to have a more lengthy discussion or question, then you're able to do that there. So how are we going to do our synchronous learning session? We have our different platforms. So the first one is the Canvas K-12, which is our main LMS. So all of your materials will be placed there and your activities would then be submitted there. For Discord and Messenger, I would be using those ones mostly for announcements. So if I need to announce the link for the new synchronous learning session, or if there's something that you need to know abruptly, then I would be using Messenger and Discord. And then lastly, we have individual consultation. So you can either use Discord, email, or Messenger. As I've stated a while ago, I would like you to use email if you want a more instant answer. Secondly, Discord, and then lastly, Messenger, since I don't really open my Messenger that often. Now we have here our materials and equipment. So a lot of the things that you'll be doing is drawing, so it's kind of impossible for you not to have the different materials and equipment. So the design of the materials and equipment, it's not really anything fancy. If you have certain materials at home, then you're able to do the activities without really spending that much money. So here are just some things that you might need for this subject and also the subject after it, which is animation 11b. So here we have our sketchbook or sketch. Of course, you need your paper rather. So the first one is you need a sketchbook or a sketch pad. So this tends to be more recommended than bond paper because they tend to be a bigger size, and my recommended size is right here, but any size of sketch pad or sketchbook would be better. But if you're planning to buy, I would recommend that you have a sketchbook or a sketch pad. The reason for that one is because you can easily have it, so you don't really have to shuffle through finding bond papers. And also it can be more of a portfolio, so you can try to look for your progress through the use of your sketchbook or sketchpad. If you don't have, or if you don't really want to buy a sketchbook or a sketchpad, then bond paper will do as well. So your white bond paper, any size will do. You can use A4, short, long, doesn't matter as long as you're able to do the activities. As much as possible, no line paper will be used because it will be distracting to the output that you will be creating. So you can either use, as stated, a sketchbook or a sketchpad. So the one on the left is a sketchpad and the one on the right is a sketchbook. We also have bond paper, more or less you know how this looks like. Next, we have the pencil. So for the pencil, so a lot of our activities would actually be done in pencil. So you can choose a pencil, whichever you would like according to your needs. So as long as it's a working pencil, any pencil would be fine. But if you want to be a little bit more specific, so you can either choose a graphite or a wooden pencil. For the grade, I would recommend that you would use something either a 1, 2, or 3 pencil if you're looking at Mongol, Stabilo, and so on and so forth. But if let's say you're trying to look more for Staedtler or Faber-Castell, then it's better for you to have a more detailed grade. So it is recommended that you either use HB or something with F. So either 2F or 3F. 4F is a little bit too light. As much as possible, please do not use B pencils because that's too dark and it will be very difficult for you to erase it later on. So for the pencil, the one on the left is a wooden or a graphite pencil. The one on the right is a mechanical pencil. Whatever suits your needs more, then you can use either of which. There's not really a lot of difference in terms of the output, but in terms of its use, you might be able to see that there are some differences. So for example, a wooden pencil is of course a lot cheaper compared to that of a mechanical pencil, and they tend to have more grades. So you can have an HB and then an F or a 2F for you to have different types of pencils. For mechanical, you don't really need to sharpen it, and tendency is that it would be a bit more long lasting because all you have to do is to refill the lead, whereas for a wooden pencil, you have to constantly sharpen it, and once it's sharpened to a smaller size, it might be a bit more difficult to use. For the pencil, you can either use, so the graded pencils kind of look like this. So it's usually at the very top of the pencil, wherein the eraser is usually. For Mongol pencils, you can use either number 1, 2, or 3. Doesn't really matter because they don't really have much difference. So the numbers 1, 2, and 3 is usually used for taking examinations. But for us in the drawing world, either would work. Whereas for the more complicated graded pencils that we have, as you can see right here, for your F, H, and HB, as well as your 2H and 3H, they tend to be a bit lighter. However, you can still somewhat see a portion of it. If you have a darker pencil, like let's say B and above, it's going to be a little bit too dark, which is going to be difficult to erase. Whereas if you have 4H and higher, tendency is that you would not be able to see a thing. So having the middle is quite good. Also, other materials, you need to have your camera or scanner for you to be able to take a photo of what you have done. Also, if you need an eraser, sharpener, or ruler, you can use those ones as well. So here are some things that you will not necessarily need for this subject. First one is inking tools. You're not allowed to ink your final output. If you will be inking your final output, I will be asking you to redraw it again. Next one, for charcoal or darker pencils. So technically they are pencils. However, I don't really recommend you using them because they are very much more difficult to erase. Smudging tools, we won't really be doing any shading or highlighting at this point, so there's not really a necessity for it. Coloring materials, we don't really need to color anything. Please do not use any digital drawing or equipment, like let's say you have a stylus, a drawing tablet. Please do not use them. Everyone will be using traditional drawing. Also, once you have taken your photo or your scan, please do not do any significant post-processing and filtering of photos and outputs. So maybe basic filtering or post-processing, like let's say resizing the photo, because for some cameras they tend to have like 4,000 pixels and you don't need all 4,000 pixels of it. For some, probably you might want to remove some of the white space or the dead space so that you can clearly see the output. You might need to rotate your output. You might want to make it a bit more, let's say, a bit more contrasted so that you can see the activity a bit clearer. But if, like, let's say you're already changing the color, you're already removing, cleaning it up digitally, that's not really recommended or that's not really allowed to be used. Lastly, we have our student expectations. So for the student expectations, here are just some things that I would like you to observe while you are taking up this course. So the first one is the attendance. So the attendance particularly for synchronous learning sessions. So the attendance is not necessarily mandatory. However, it is highly encouraged because a lot of the things that we'll be doing right there is more of interpreting the module, and without really some interpretation of the module, you might find it a bit more difficult, but that would depend from person to person. And of course, I will be demonstrating a lot of what is placed in the module. So for you to have a more a more in-depth approach or a more in-depth immersion of how it works, you might want to attend the synchronous learning sessions. Next one is for online activity. So first of all, please use the Canvas K-12 LMS. We will not be asking you to use anything else. So your submission of activities would solely be there. Your modules and your content would be placed there first. And also, if you need to have faster information, then probably we would be using Discord or Facebook Messenger. Next one is for the submission of activities. So please submit the activities only through the Canvas K-12 LMS. Another important thing right here is for you to follow the instructions and specifications in the activity. So here's an interesting thing. There might be some people who are really good at drawing, but they don't really follow instructions well. If they don't follow instructions well, then tendency is that that would be minus points according to the rubric. Because if you don't follow instructions, tendency you might have minus points in the scoring system. Compare it to, like, let's say someone who isn't really that good at drawing, but they have followed the instructions to the letter, they tend to have higher scores. That is a possibility. It has happened before. So it's really important for you to follow the instructions for you to get the highest possible score that you can. Also, for a way for you to be able to improve yourself, I will be placing comments, particularly for the drawing activities. So please check them using the Canvas K-12 LMS, because that is a way for you to kind of improve yourself through the comments that will be given to you by the subject teacher. Next one is for the consultation with the teacher. So you can either use email, Discord, or Messenger. So again, email first, then Discord, then Messenger. Also, please follow the consultation hours if you want a more abrupt or a more direct response. And you had your oral communication previously. I would like you to please follow proper and respectful communication guidelines. Lastly, nextly we have for academic integrity. So academic integrity is essentially doing your activities as objectively and as honestly as you can. So having some sort of cheating is a violation of academic integrity, and you can have some consequences. Like, let's say you may acquire a 0 and you can be reported to your class advisor, to the conduct coordinator, and or to your parents or guardians. So what are some ways on how you can cheat and therefore get a 0? So number one is if you are taking a quiz and if you're opening other tabs that can be visible through the use of the Canvas K-12 LMS. And if you have open tabs, that's a grounds for cheating. So like, let's say, even though you're just going to open your Spotify and then change the music, that is an example of choosing or opening other tabs or opening other windows. So that can be a ground of you getting 0. So for safety purposes, whenever you're taking a quiz, please make sure to turn off all of the other tabs and that you're not distracted, so that you would be able to prevent these types of things. Next one is having exact or similar answers or activities. So this can be either for the drawing activities or for the quizzes. So if you have the exact same score, the exact correct answers, the exact incorrect answers, so that might be a little bit more suspicious. We also have here for plagiarism and tracing. So this is more prominent when it comes to your drawing activities. So plagiarism is essentially taking the activities or the ideas of others without any proper credit. So for this one, even though if you give proper credit, that's not really what we're going for. It's more of doing the activities as honestly as possible. So if you're going to trace a character, if you're asked to create a character and it looks almost very much similar to an existing character in media, you'll be asked to repeat it again, or you will automatically get a 0. For tracing, either tracing your classmates' activities or somewhere within the internet, automatically that's a 0 score. Nextly, we have critiquing of activities. So another important part of the drawing activities is critiquing, meaning it's more of getting comments, mostly negative comments, on how you can improve your activity. So with this one, you might be able to see in terms of your comments, I would be focusing more on what are the things that you did wrong rather than the things that you have done right. So if I don't really have any comments, that means you did everything right. So this critiquing process is going to be a little bit more harsh than probably some of you might be expecting. The reason for that one is because it's very difficult to give individual credit for a number of people in such a limited amount of time. So it would just be better for me in terms of efficiency to just focus on the things that you might want to improve on. Getting a critique is a natural part of becoming better, not only for drawing or illustration, but it can also be for animation. if you're learning a skill like learning an instrument, dancing, singing, for you to be able to get better, you need to have comments from someone else. And those negative comments would essentially make you a bit better. So with that one, please make sure with that one I would like to ask of you not to take it to personal offense. It's not personal attack on you. It's not that I hate you, but it's more of these are the things that you would like to improve. So don't try to think na it's something against you. And lastly, if you would like to have more clarifications on the comments, then you can always ask. Lastly, we have for practicing. So practicing, as we've stated a while ago, when you're trying to learn a skill, it's something that's necessary. So it can be for dancing, singing, learning an instrument, doing a hobby. You have to do it over and over again for you to be able to get better, of course, with the proper critiquing. So for you to be able to get better in drawing, it's not something that's overnight. Even though that we have tried to make it so that you can learn drawing as fast as possible and more efficient as possible, we can't really guarantee that, yeah, you just attend the class, yeah, you just do the activities, and then you would get better immediately. So it is expected that you might have to do some of the activities more than once. Probably you'll have to do a take 2 or even a take 3 for you to be able to get the best activity that you possibly can. So practicing beyond class hours is necessary for you to get better. It is also possible for you to draw things outside from your given activities. So like let's say we've asked you to draw a female character. Probably you might want to do another female character for you to get a little bit more variety. So and also it's quite necessary for you to do exercises, drawing exercises every now and then for you to get a little bit better on practicing. So these things are mostly optional. However, it is something that's necessary for you to get better if you want to get better. One more thing that I forgot to mention is more on the online activity. So it is quite necessary for you to use the Canvas K-12 LMS, but for one reason or another, you're not really able to utilize it. Please let me know. I am available, or I am considering just sending the PDFs through your Facebook Messenger and just letting you send it through Messenger. But you have to let me know in advance. So suddenly suddenly you just didn't have any internet connection for that day and there was a deadline. You can still submit a lot of things beyond the deadline. So that's most likely just a way for you to kind of like pace yourself. But if you are able to access Canvas, then submit through Canvas, no matter how late it is. If it's a little bit too late, like let's say uploading and you haven't really submitted your module 1, then that's a little bit more suspicious. So that ends my presentation for today. So if you have any questions, please let me know through email, through Discord, and through Messenger. And with that one, I hope that we will be able to get along within the next trimester while I'm teaching you, and I hope you're able to learn a little bit more and apply it later on in your lives. So with that one, I hope you have a good day ahead, and I'll see you on the next synchronous learning session.